Okay. Hello and welcome to the next virtual author visit at Westbury Royal Public Library. I am Michelle Marcus, reference librarian, your host today. Just to let you know, I will start by having all the attendees on mute. Most of you are regulars have been here before, so yeah, if you could just mute yourselves while I do the interview with the author, and then after I will have time for any people who are here who want to ask the author a question. So, okay. So, all right. So we took the photo, so that's all taken care of. Okay. And I'm excited to speak to best-selling author Noelle Salazar. So, as I mentioned before, we took a photo. The reason why we took a photo is we're doing this with, it's co-sponsored by Adventures by the Book. And for the events, they like if we take a photo. So that's to tell you a little more about that. Okay, so I'm going to share a little more about Noelle. She was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, where she's been a Navy recruit, a medical assistant, an NFL cheerleader, and always a storyteller. As a novelist, she has done extensive research into the Women's Air Force Service pilots, interviewing vets and visiting the training facility, now a museum dedicated to the aviation WASP in Sweetwater, Texas. When she's not writing, she can be found dodging raindrops and daydreaming of her next book. She lives in Bothell, Washington with her family. Her debut, The Flight Girls, was a USA Today and international bestseller. It was followed by the critically acclaimed Angels of the Resistance, The Roaring Days of Sora Lily, and The Lives We Leave Behind is her fourth novel, which just came out on November 2024. Hello, Noelle, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this virtual author visit with the Westbury Memorial Public Library. I am so excited to discuss your book, The Lives We Leave Behind. Such a compelling historical fiction book, but interesting, mysterious twist. But we won't get that away because I know some of you haven't read it yet. Can you please share a little about the book spoiler free? This way we can give audience members who haven't read yet the book a little introduction to the book.
Yes, I think so. It's always hard for me to describe my books. So the story is a dual timeline, which I haven't. I with Zora Lily, I did a little bit of a dual timeline, but I personally don't always enjoy reading dual timelines. So I took a page out of Kristen Hanna's book in The Nightingale, where you just kind of go back and forth a few times because I love settling into one part of the story. I love being able to sink into it and not get pulled out of it too much. But this is basically about it starts in present day with William, who is a World War II veteran and a widower. And we meet him when it's been a year since his wife died, and he's going through her things with his daughter and granddaughter. And this woman comes to the door and says a name he hasn't heard in decades. And then we go back in time and we meet Kate, who is a flight nurse in World War II. And when we meet her, she's working in the Pacific. Um, and she pretty quickly has an accident. And when she returns to the front, they send her actually to the European theater, and she ends up in England. And it's almost as if it's two books and it was interesting when I wrote this because I remember like three-quarters of the way through, I had this weird feeling or this weird sense of like, I don't know Kate. It's very strange that I don't feel like I know her because usually I know my characters inside and out. Um, and so I made a little note to myself, like, put in more inner thoughts, like so we'll know her better. And then I got to the end of it and I realized that I wasn't supposed to because she's kind of a mystery. Like you think you know her in the beginning, and you know her heart, but she starts making decisions that sort of unravel her. And so this is just kind of her story of like the lies basically she's had to tell to survive in a multitude of ways.
Very good. Can you please share a little more about the themes of this book?
I mean, I think a lot of it is about I always write about women persevering. I think that's such a strong theme for me because I feel like I'm always just trying. And so I love writing these women that are just like refuse to say no. And so I think perseverance is a big one. Hope and found family for sure. Um, and again, like what we will do to sort of save ourselves in the end. Yeah.
Very good. What was the inspiration for this novel?
Oh gosh, kind of a funny story because when I wrote my first historical fiction novel, when I wrote The Flight Girls, that wasn't my first novel. My first novel was vampires. And so I fell into The Flight Girls. I found the Women Air Force Service pilots, and I don't know why I never thought I'd write historical fiction. It never actually crossed my mind, but I had always read historical fiction and loved it. And so when I found that story, it sort of fell in my lap. I was at my aunt's house and she was studying to be a docent at the Museum of Flight because they were about to have an exhibit for the WASP. So that one like fell in my lap that way. And then after I wrote that book, I kind of was like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I still got these vampires over here. But my editor, because the book did so well, she was like, maybe write another historical fiction book. And so a friend of mine had actually sent me an email like 2 years before about the Oversegan sisters, which were the inspiration for Angels of the Resistance. Um, so that sort of fell in my lap. And then for Zora, I learned the name of my great great grandmother, which was Zora Lilly. And I just was blown away that I'd never heard that name before. So that sort of fell in my lap. But for this one, I had to go digging. And so if you read historical fiction, I'm sure you know the name Kate Quinn. And she and I are good friends. And I just happened to be at her house one day and I was like, how do you find ideas? Like if they don't fall in your lap, if your friend doesn't email them to you, then how do you find your ideas? And so she told me all of her secrets. No, she didn't tell me all her secrets, but she let me know like, kind of what she does. And so I went home and I just started Googling like amazing women in history and came, it's Eleanor Roosevelt and Cleopatra, like all the, usual suspects. And then there was this tiny little photo of this woman named Jane. Oh my gosh, her last name just left my mind. Anyways, her name was Jane and just said she was a World War II flight nurse. And I didn't know flight nurses, they didn't exist until World War II. And that to me is like, that's the thing that hooks me is when I learn something, something I didn't know. And so just World War II flight nurses, which flight nurses were interesting to me anyways. My brother's ex-wife, she was training to be a flight nurse in the Army right before they got divorced. And she was telling me all about their training and it was terrifying. Like I would never in my life do this job. And so then I was like, that made me extra curious, like what these women do, and just like going down that rabbit hole of like what they were experiencing, what they were seeing. It just intrigued me, and I just wanted to share. And I feel like that's what historical fiction writers are always doing. We're just like sharing this information that we found that like we love, that we were excited by. So I was just really inspired by this woman, Jane, whose name is lost right now, in a haze of antibiotics. But just like her story, and then I had found this book that a woman, I think in the 80s, put together. She started reaching out to a bunch of flight nurses and nurses during World War II, and she compiled a bunch of their stories, and which was so thoughtful of her because eventually they will get lost. And so I just started reading through those little anecdotes of what these women experienced, and my mind was just, blown, and I just got excited and had to share it.
Well, just to let you know, I went to took a look at the book at the author's notes because I knew it was going to be there. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right, but it was Kendai.
And yes, yes, thank you.
Just
Yes.
wanted to, I'm not sure if how you pronounce
I
that.
don't know how you say it. I'm like Kende. I'm not sure how you say it,
Yeah,
but yeah,
but
that's her name.
uh,
Thank you.
yes. So, so relating to that question, building on that question, what kind of research did you do for this book?
I mean, initially it was just a lot of online research. And then I got that book, which was just a wealth of information. She had it segmented by like the Pacific theater, the European theater, and just reading these different experiences that women had in those different areas. Some were in these like there were yurts, there were tents. Um, there, there was a story of one woman. She was taken to India, and she entered into like whatever it was, this tiny little cabin area that was her going to be her home. And there was a cow inside, and they were like, cows are sacred, you can't touch them. So they had to like wave it out with scarves and stuff. And then she talks about like she'd been there for a while and wakes up to a cow licking her face and having, but then in the Pacific, there's snakes and there's rats and there's other things. And then you go to England and there's like, you're in a big estate that's been, abandoned by the family or whatever. Um, so a lot of it was really just in that one book because there was so much information. There's maps and just what they like the wounds that they took care of, the men, the shape of the men that the shape they were in when they were picked up, which was just absolutely intriguing to me. I got really into the wound care because it was kind of mind blowing. Just things you wouldn't think about. I won't be really detailed because a lot of it's kind of gross, but I just thought it was interesting. Like if it was a stomach wound and they were stitched up, if the plane went up too fast, they would have to cut the stitches because it would balloon, which I was just like, that's terrifying. But you had men that had, like they said, cracked, and so they were like mentally unstable, and you're trying to handle that. And meanwhile, you might have a POW on the other side, and the friction that would be causing in the plane. It was just, I mean, all of it was so interesting to me. But yeah, that one book really, I bought a couple more too, but that one was just spectacular.
So, oh, of course, I just want to say, so you actually use that story in about with the India of the cow, right? So that's real? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that was real. Yeah.
That is so funny. I was laughing at that. So, oh, and the other thing is, so like you did include like prisoners in war part of the story. Was that, did you have a section in the book that talked about that? Like that book that you were just talking about?
Yeah. There was one of the women who she did talk about that. And it was something I never even considered. And that, again, it was just like, oh, again, mind blowing. Because I'm just thinking they're just picking up American soldiers. But of course, they're going to have to pick up POWs and they have to keep them alive because that's their job. And just how confusing and awful that would have been was very interesting to me.
Definitely sounds interesting. So we're going back. We said one of the themes, of course, is found family, and this question relates to that. So we know like Kate's a really strong character. I mean, not to spoil, but what she has gone through and just how she copes and deals with everything. But even like strong women need support too. So I was wondering like how you created the characters who became her friends and what you tended to do with their relationship.
I I kind of missed some of the words in that, in just the last, like what the actual question was.
Oh, so basically, so we're talking about, with found family. So, in different places she meets different like women who become like almost like sisters to her, like friends. So I was just wondering how you created those
Oh,
characters and what you tended to do with their relationships.
I always draw on my own relationships with my girlfriends. And then I grew up with two sisters. Um, I was always I've always just loved watching my mom and her sister. They have such a great relationship. Literally every Christmas Eve, they swing dance to guitar music. My ex plays guitar, and so he will come and he'll play music, and they're always swing dancing. Um, I went I went to boot camp when I was 18. I was a gymnast. I've always kind of part of groups of women. So for me, it's just always looking to those bonds that I have formed and like that kind of found female family that I have had over the years. I remember when I graduated high school, I lost that for a while because I was done with high school and I was doing gymnastics in high school and part of the school. And it was very I felt that loss deeply. So a few years later, when my girlfriend was like, "Hey, you should try out for an NFL team," she was a cheerleader for an NFL team, Seahawks. Um, and at first I was like, No, that's not for me. I'm not a cheerleader." But I was a dancer. I'd been a dancer since I was 3. And I was a little, I was, I would think I was a little terrified and probably stereotyping like cheerleaders, and they were the most inclusive, lovely people, some of my best friends to this day. That was like 100 years ago now, but yeah, shame on me for stereotyping. And but yeah, I mean, I draw on those experiences to write these women. These are my, these women that I'm writing, these are my friends. Like these are my experiences with my friends and my sisters.
I love that. That is definitely great. Um, about spoilers, did you know from the beginning how you wanted to end the book?
Yeah, so fact about me is I can't actually start a story unless I know how it ends. Like I cannot. I'm like paralyzed. I don't know where I'm going, so I cannot even start. So I have to have the end in my head. It never changes. That's how it ends. And then I don't need to know how I'm getting there, but I just absolutely need to know how it ends.
Okay, and William is a great character too. Can you share what you think about him made him somebody who was able to get through to Kate and give her hope for a romantic relationship?
Um, why he could?
Yeah, why him and not maybe other guys? You know.
Yeah. I think for one, he was so sweet and silly when she met him. He's a little out of it. And I think that disarmed her immediately. Uh, he wasn't coming on to her really. He was silly and he's losing blood and and she just doesn't really buy it. But I think it just endeared him to her, this, strong soldier in this predicament, still trying somewhat, and just sort of silly. And for her, I think with what she experienced in her life, I just gonna return to the word disarming. I think that's what it was for her. Like it was an unexpected encounter, and I think it just endeared him to her. And then he turns out to be maybe not what she's experienced with the men around her, soldiers and stuff. He is very kind and open and supportive and not smarmy. So I think that really won her over.
I could see that. Before it was mentioned in your bio for your first book that you did extensive research on WASP, the Women's Air Force Service pilots during World War II. Can you tell us like a little about that in your visit to the training facility that's now the museum? It just sounds
Yeah,
very
that was an amazing experience. And to this day, I still I still hear from I was brought into the aviation community, which was just I not anything I ever looked to have happen because I'm not a good flyer. Um, I did a lot of research and that book, it was my first book. I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, technically it wasn't my first book, but it was the first book that I really wanted to get published. And so I worked on it for off and on for 8 years. And so I was constantly going back and looking for more information, more information, more information. And and as I did that, like over the years, like more became available. And I found out like, oh, that there was this training facility that was now a museum. And then we sold the book and I posted something on Twitter about it. And this woman reached out to me and her grandmother had been a WASP and she herself had written a book about her grandmother's experience. She wanted to be buried at Arlington. And at the time she couldn't. And so they went through this whole legal process and so that she could be eventually. Um, and so anyway, she reached out to me and encouraged me to come to they every year they have a homecoming, a WASP homecoming reunion at the in Sweetwater at the museum. And so I reached out to the museum and they invited me to come. But before I went, I actually spoke with one of the WASP on the phone And so she had connected me to this woman as well. And it was funny because the questions I had for her were so just they weren't exciting. I really just wanted to know, like, you wake up in the morning and what do you do? Like, I wanted to know about the day to day, like what that felt like, what that sounded like. Um, and then also I kept reading these accounts from the women that, oh, when service was done, I just went back to what I was doing. And they're so casual about it. So I asked her, so when it was over, what did you do? And she was like, I went back to work. And I was like, okay, that really was the mindset. It was just like, okay, we go back. And then I went to that homecoming reunion and I got to meet in person two of the WASP. And they were like in their late 90s, and it was just mind-blowingly awesome. But a really bittersweet thing happened too while I was there. So I had a little table with my books and I had stepped away for a minute. And then I turned around and I saw this woman standing in front of the table. So I went over to, say hi. And we ended up having this lovely conversation. And then I looked at her shirt and she was wearing this huge button that I didn't even notice the whole time we were talking. And it was the woman that I had talked to on the phone. And I was like, oh, that's, so and so. And I can't remember her name, Mildred. Um, and she was like, oh, yeah, that was my mom. She had just passed away.
Mhm.
And so then we're both crying. And I was just like, she was so, so sweet and amazing and so lovely to talk to. And um, so, yeah, I've gone back a few times to their reunion. They invite me every year, and I try and go back as much as possible. I got to go up in one of the planes they trained in, and which was a surprise to me. But yeah, it's just that community really like took me in. I hear from women, young girls like 15 years old that read my book and then say, I'm going to go get my pilot's license. This, inspired me. And I hear from the members of family members of the WASP, and they're like, they say things like, this sounds just like the stories my mom told or my aunt told and stuff like that. And so it's just the most touching thing that I never ever could have expected. And it's really been just the most amazing journey for me. So yeah, I so much research on that book and well worth it.
I haven't, this is actually the first one I read, but you know, I have to go back and read it, especially after hearing all that and then like reading about it in the biography, in the bio, I mean. And amazing story. Can you please share how you decided to become a published author?
Oh, well, I never thought that would happen. I excuse me. I mean, I've been writing stories since I was a little kid. My mom actually gave me a big envelope full of my stories from elementary school on up, and I just always I say I've never been bored in my life because I'm just always in my head. Someone's always doing something in there, and throughout my 20s, I kept trying to write a book, but I really didn't know what I was trying to write. And so I kind of just kept writing the same thing over and over for about a decade. And then when I was like 34, I think, all I remember it was the beginning of summer, and all of my girlfriends were talking about the book Twilight. And I was like, isn't that for kids? I was so confused. So I ended up reading those books that summer, because the last one had come out that summer. And then at the end of it, I read this quote by Maya Angelou, I think it was, that said, write the book you want to read. So I've always had like, ever since Interview with a Vampire, I kind of like vampires. So I thought, I'm going to write a vampire book that's for me. And so I did that. And then I didn't know what to do with it. And I was just like, kind of whatever. And then I met an author, and she encouraged me to go to a writer's conference. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm just sure I'm going to try this out. And at that time, I've always been like painfully shy. So it was really hard for me to go to this thing. I talked to no one. I did not network. I had one appointment time with one agent because that's how they did it at that time. You could make an appointment with one agent. Um, and that was basically the only person I talked to. Otherwise, I just sort of hid in corners and watched people. But that very first day, it was like this 8 hour long day where they had different people talk, and then you broke for lunch, and then there was more people like just talking about writing and stuff. And I remember just sitting there feeling like this is where I belong. And it was the first time I'd ever felt that in my life. And I didn't know what that meant for me or where that would take me, but I ended up going to that conference for 5 years before I met my agent, the woman that became my agent. And I just, it gave me steam. It gave me like this idea. And so then I wrote The Flight Girls and I don't know. I really didn't think anything would come of it. I just kind of was like, I worked. I was a receptionist at a medical office, and then I was a stay-at-home mom. I really didn't think anything would ever happen. I barely tried to get an agent. You're supposed to send out these query letters, and I was terrible about it. I maybe sent out 15 total in 5 years. I just felt like I don't know what I'm doing, and this is never going to happen anyways, and I'm fine. My life is fine. Um, so when it happened, it was pretty, pretty awesome, pretty amazing.
That's great. Um, I'm looking at like all the different like type jobs you had. I was just wondering like if you felt anything from like your professional like background like helped you become a great author.
I mean, all of it,
Mhm.
sure. I mean, boot camp, um, cheering, dancing in front of thousands of people, dealing with I worked in an ear, nose, and throat office, so I had a lot of sick people in my face all the time. But learning to be kind and to listen and to just provide great customer service. I feel like you get so many personalities coming in and out of your life, and I think as a writer, you are a witness to humans. And we just watch and we listen. And I can't tell you how many notes are in my phone about just random, the way I see somebody walk, a phrase I hear somebody say. But I just feel like, yeah, we're just sort of witnesses to humanity, and we just try and document it the best we can. And I think going all these different ways in my life, trying to find my way, just has really helped like bring me all kinds of fun details to put in my books.
Oh, I love that as well. Our audience and I love to hear book recommendations. Can you share like anything that you read recently you really like?
So I have been on a rom-com kick. So I don't know if anybody's into rom-coms. I just recently submitted one to my agent. So I love anything by Sarah Adams. Um, they're very, they're not too spicy. Um, So I don't know, I like her tone. It's just easy. They're just easy to read stories and they're not super long. And so I just like devour them. I've really enjoyed Abby Jimenez. Her books are wonderful. Oh my gosh. I am new to her this last year and I am obsessed. Catherine Center, she writes lovely books. But I also I read all over the place. I do read a little bit of sci-fi and fantasy thanks to this little group of friends. I'm trying to think of what I've read recently. I mean, if you guys haven't read Remarkably Bright Creatures, please do. It's oh gosh.
Mhm.
I listened to it too, and oh my gosh, I was just so in love with that book. I just recommend it all the time. My all-time favorite book is The Night Circus, after Pride and Prejudice, because Pride and Prejudice is the original rom-com, but The Night Circus is. I met the author a couple years ago when she was in town, and I told her, I've always wanted to write like magic, and I said, and then I read The Night Circus, and I'm just going to leave it to you because just no, I could never. I could never do anything as spectacular as that book. I just think it's so beautiful. Actually, just I was in Palm Springs with my best friend. We had a little girls' weekend a couple months ago, and we were in the best bookstore in Palm Springs, and that's what it's called. And there was a copy of The Night Circus, and she was like, "I've never read that," and I was like, "I am buying this book for you. Read this book." But my boyfriend even we buddy read it a couple of years ago. Like I had already read it, but I was like, I want you to read this book. It's so intricate and lovely. And I feel like when you read it, if you haven't read it, my favorite way to read it is like to just a chapter. It sounds weird, a chapter at a time, but literally like a chapter and then sit with it because there's so much beautiful detail. I just feel like it's so special that if you just try and race through it, I feel like you don't get the layers and just like the intricacies of all the things that are going on. It's just the most beautifully written book, I think. And The Midnight Library is a really nice book if such a great story. Um, it's so hard for me to read when I'm writing because I like feel like I'm gonna take take things or I feel like I should be writing, I shouldn't be, reading. Um, but yeah, so it's been a lot of rom-coms lately, and I can't name specific ones, but those are the authors I'm absolutely just loving. And of course, I'm always a fan of Kate Quinn and Madeline Martin. They're two really good friends. Elise Hooper, she's got a new book coming out. So she writes historical fiction, but her new book, it is historical fiction, but it's about dollhouses. It's called The Library of Dollhouses, and it comes out April 1st. And she's been having, if you don't follow her on social media, you should, because she has the funniest like dollhouse content. She's making paper dollhouse. She's doing all kinds of funny things, and she's so great. She's done some launch events with me for my book, and she's just a really sweet, amazing local author that I adore.
Well, I have to admit, I haven't read Night Circus, but I definitely want to read that now. I love Elise Hooper, Madeline Martin, and Kate Quinn are some of my favorite authors as well. And okay, so next, can you please share what you're writing next?
Yeah, so I wrote a rom-com. Um, I have stories just sort of fall into my head most of the time. Not when I need them to, like when I was trying to come up with something for Lies. But so I wrote a rom-com that hopefully will get picked up this next year. But I'm also working on it is historical fiction. I don't know what it is. We're calling it a dual timeline, but it's mostly about the present day, and it's about um, this woman who's a forensic archaeologist slash anthropologist who, after like a 9-day storm on the East Coast, wakes up to the news that a shipwreck has been found on the beach, and and a lot of skeletal remains. And so she's called out to go check them out and make sure it's not like an investigation. It's just remains. And while she's out there, she finds a set of bones that it's clearly a young female, a young woman, and there is a chain with a ring on it with the remains. And this woman, she wears a ring on a chain, and so she has this kind of instant, bond and wants to like know about this woman. And then we go back to the 1800s, and we potentially meet this woman, but you get this kind of mystery and but it's really about the present day woman and kind of it's called All That Remains, and kind of what she's unearthing in her own life because it's unearthing a trauma that she has had and she's going to have to now deal with it. And it's pretty personal for me because like when I wrote Angels of the Resistance, that book is very personal to me. I wrote it during lockdown, which was not fun. And um, because it was about these young women who were basically experiencing trauma repeatedly, it brought up my own trauma from when I was a similar age. And I remember my editor would leave these notes like, but what are they feeling? And I was like, I don't actually want to go there. And so it became very personal for me because I really had to like dig in and experience and end up in therapy because, oh, I guess I get to deal with this. But it kind of opened a door for me to be, I feel like, honest about those feelings. They experience what we now know as PTSD that they didn't, they kind of gloss over back in the day. They didn't really deal with that kind of thing. So it was nice to be able to kind of include that and see them experience these things and how they dealt with it personally. And so I feel like it's opened me up to be more honest and open about those kinds of things. And so I mean, I think I started writing this book about 7 years ago. And I feel like it's the most authentic voice I've ever written in. I love her. She's kind of snarky. She's got a 18-year-old son, and his best friend's name is Zeus, and he tries to live by that name, but he has the tiniest little like lightning bolt tattoo on his arm. And it's just like I feel like a really great cast of characters, and you kind of go sweeping back to the 1800s, and you get this whole different vibe from what's going on there. So it's been really fun to write.
That, that sounds like it's gonna be great. Sure. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open up for questions. I already see I have two text up. So again, if you feel like you'd rather put it in the chat, you could also put the questions in the chat as well. But I'm gonna start with Maria. Please
I
Right.
just wrote them down. I have like two or three. The first one is how many passengers can you fit on the plane? The nurse, like, how many, do you know approximately how many they can carry?
How many what? I'm sorry.
The sick people, the transport.
How many in the plane?
Yeah,
I think it was about like 24 at the most.
wow, it's a large plane. I guess they're all lying
Yeah.
down and
And they're like sardines, like
oh.
like three bunks high. Yeah. I
Um,
don't know
well,
how
in
they.
reading, I listened to the audiobook. I don't know if you know Martha Hall Kelly,
Yes.
Ravern's book, and have you read Gather? Do you
I
like
have read one of her books, like, oh,
Lilac
I
Girls?
was writing The Flight Girls. Yeah. When I was writing that, I
Um,
would read her
you
book.
mentioned Yelena. Is that was that a real person? The Ravern's book with the rabbit?
So
No,
no,
they, no, it wasn't a real character. It's a
no.
made up.
Yeah.
Uh, um, in it, I don't know if it's true about the shaving, not the Germans, but the Polish and the Czechs. Is that, I don't know.
Um, I'm trying to remember now. Um, it's so hard to remember the like tiny details because I think I wrote it last year and then you start writing your next book and
Yeah,
you have to
yeah,
get rid of information. I that part was so sad to me.
yes. Mhm.
Yes, it was factual because I very much looked that up and like
There was
kind
like,
of
oh, I
like
thought they did everybody.
no, it was very I'm trying to remember where found that, but I remember finding it and then kind of looking more to kind of make sure. And that could have just been the one camp. So
That yeah,
um,
and the other camp probably Auschwitz, they did everybody
yeah,
probably.
I think they
Ravensbrück
did
probably not.
everybody, but I
Yeah, yeah.
think this camp, I think it was just kind of by the camp. But yeah, I thought it was so interesting just because it was so specific. Um, so
Stuck in my
good question.
head.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Like,
it's
oh,
in mine too.
surprise.
'Cause I remember going and looking for more information because I was like, "Oh, really? I thought it was everybody." So yeah, I thought that was a really interesting detail for me too, and
The
just like
Nights,
little triangles and things.
the Night Circus. What author? Do you know it? Because
Aaron
is there
Morgan,
more than one title? What
yeah,
is it?
Aaron Morgenstern.
Aaron Morgenstern. Okay, I'm just gonna write it down and try it out.
She's
Morgenstern.
lovely. Yeah, read it like just sink into it one chapter at a time and just I just love it so much.
Thank you. I'll let everybody else go. Those are my questions that I wrote down. I love the audiobook and the both
Oh,
the narrators and I'll be reading all your other historical. I love historical
thank you.
fictions.
I
So I'm
appreciate it.
looking forward to reading all your other ones. Thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, and now I'm gonna go to Debbie. Yes, your question next.
I popped up to go and look, Maria, to see if I could find my night circus. It's very well worn. I think it got checked out of my library. I read it several years ago as well. Noelle, I think we had a conversation about this at the dinner when we did it at Zora. Do you remember? We were
I'm
both
like,
like,
I know you.
no. And they were like, what are you talking about? And it was like, I mean, it's just such a beautiful fantasy book. I got like really like stuck after reading again Twilight. I think we hooked a lot on a lot of like the same things. And I
Yeah, yeah.
loved your this book had me riveted
Oh,
from page one.
thank
Could
you.
not put it down, crying, laughing. It was just so beautiful. I want to know what was the most challenging part for you to write and what maybe got, okay, first start with that.
I think just figuring out how to torment her the most. And actually, I really didn't know all the places that she was going to take me. I really didn't know. I had this idea in my head. I knew where she was going to end up, which was a little more bittersweet than my other books. But also honest to the time, not everybody had a, sunshiny ending. And not that she doesn't have a good ending. She does, I think, but it, maybe not what everybody wants. But yeah, I think it was just like, what was most challenging? It was trying to figure out geographically what
Mhm.
cities we were taking back, the Allies were taking back. So
Mhm.
her. That was the most challenging. I'm like, where can I get her? And then where does that end? And she's gonna have to like slip through somehow. And how do I do that? So that
So
was that
did you plot that out, or was that like plotted as you went? Because you knew where you wanted her to end up. And
yeah.
then you had her where she started, so you had to kind of weave her through in there, and then also find like the accuracy in with like the dates or what was going on
Yeah.
in the war at that time.
Yeah,
So
I literally had to stop and figure it out because I was like, this has to be plausible. I can't just like throw her in somewhere and people will be like, no, at that time you should have been like that. It's not true. So yeah, I literally
yeah,
had to like plot it out, based on, I mean, I was looking up every city and like blowing up
right.
maps and like, well, what's this little tiny city here? What's happening there? And a lot of these cities had been like just, decimated and stuff. And so
Exactly.
trying to like just get her through somehow so that
And keep her alive.
yes. So yeah, that was I think the most challenging because it's like you can go in from one angle, but then is that the truth? So then you have to try and go in from another angle and like try and ask all the
Yeah.
questions to try and be as accurate as possible and flub a little when you have to because it's fiction. So
Well,
sometimes,
it is. I mean, that you got to have that storyline that really,
yeah,
helps to maintain the reader's, grasp on it.
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to let others ask questions now too. I'm not going to ask more questions. But if mine doesn't get asked, I reserve the right to come back.
Okay.
Very good. Next, we're gonna go to, thank you, Debbie. Next, we're gonna go to Francine.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, first of all, I have not read your book, Nicole, but after this discussion, I will be reading it very soon. I'm a big fan of Michelle and all her book Zooms, and some of my other book buddies are on here. They highly recommended it. So now I'm like super excited to read it because I love getting to know a new author. So thank you for your time and thank you for making sure I get a new author in my life.
Well, thank you. That's very flattering. I very much appreciate it. It's so nice when you have like word of mouth.
Well, yeah, some of my book buddies are on here and we talk books all the time. And so when Michelle was doing this, because my intent was to read the book, but I've been a little busy lately. But I'm like, I'm just going to join anyway because she said there's no spoilers. But I'm so glad I did because I cannot tell you how delightful you are and hearing about your books. Of course, if I read this one, then I got to read the other ones and, go down all that. And then hopefully we'll have you come back again or something at some point. But, and by the way, go Seattle Seahawks. So that's very cool. And anyway, there's other people wants to ask questions, but anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That makes me feel very good. Thank you.
Good. You should.
Thank you, Francine. And next, we're gonna go to Karen.
Yes, hi. I only have one question. Do they still have something like flight nurses or similar to it? Because they're still flying, sick people like from one area, usually to Germany, to the hospital in Frankfurt or stuff like that. So they still have people like that, nurses?
Yes, they do. So my brother's now ex-wife, she was actually training to be one. So I definitely a job that's still happening.
Yeah. Now they are I assume, working, for the United States pilot, a pilot program, I mean, in the army or navy. No, that's the navy. But anyway, they're part of of our army then. For people that fighting, not like before. They were like because I thought I found your book by chance. I was downloading some books. I was going on vacation, and the Flight Girls turned up, and I read it. I had no idea you existed. And I love that. And then I come home from vacation and I saw this. Oh my God, she's there. So it was really great to know you because this book was, I couldn't put it down because not was it just interesting, but it was also really kept you really wanted to know what was going on. Of course, the ending, we hope they got together, but but still, I think it was good that it ended that way because not everybody, ends their life that way. So I'm gonna go to the other books now, but this one was absolutely tops. I like the Flight Girls too, but I like this one even better. I was just like sitting on the edge of my chair with this one.
Oh, well, that makes me very happy. I mean, Flight Girls is my first baby, but
Right.
the newest one is always like, please like, and all of them
Yeah.
are different from each
No,
other.
yeah, no, it was also good, but I'm just saying this for some reason or maybe it was a love story and there's something that really interests me. And then I could kind of, I was born in Germany, I lived through the wars, I could kind of identify with it a little bit too. So that might have something to do because I read a lot of stories out of that area and find out things that I never knew about. So
Yeah.
very interesting, just absolutely great author, fantastic. Thank
you.
you.
I noticed I'm like so in the dark. I'm sorry. The light really went away.
Karen, thank you. And next we're going to go to Sharon.
Yes, hi. And I want to thank you also, Noelle, for coming and for writing it. I did not know this book, so that's why I love these things that happen. And I really am always attracted if an author is going to be there. So I appreciate it. And I will go back and read your other ones. I think I have two. Well, I have a comment and then I have a question. One of the things, just a very small part, I don't believe it's going to give anything, it's not going to be a spoiler or anything, but when she's going to have the POWs on board, and I don't remember if that was her first flight in Europe or not, but and she just asked the questions like, what do I do? I just felt that was so real, like rather than, like she did that and the person that was doing it sort of explained some things and also like, why would you be, why was it important, other than humanitarian reasons to provide aid for a POW, they actually gave a specific reason that they might be, used in a transfer, in an exchange, which I never thought of. It just seemed, it was very quick and it was just something that really got me into the story sort of, and the way it went to a lot of different places. So I really did appreciate that. But my question is, I'm in a lot of groups with philosophy, and philosophy talks about, like the truth and, as you know it and stuff. And I disagree with people a lot because the thing of always telling the truth. And I'm wondering because sometimes you could die from it, so you do these lies. But I'm just wondering if your ideas on truth and non-truth changed in doing this book.
I mean, I think Kate believes what I believe, which is that sometimes you tell a lie to save a life, and sometimes that life is your own. So, I mean, if it doesn't harm somebody else, which, her lies were not to harm anybody. She was, I think she's tormented, and she's trying to right a wrong that's not hers to right in the first place, but she doesn't see it that way. In the grand scheme of things, her lies, they only harmed her really, but they also kept her safe. And so, I mean, I think there is a time and a place for a lie, if it's going to save a life. And it saved hers. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, my feeling was similar in that this may be a book that would help other people understand that sometimes there is a place for that. So
Yeah.
anyway, but thank you.
Yes, thank you. That was a really good question. I was very thoughtful. I like that.
All right, thank you, Sharon. And next we're going to go to Susie.
Hi, Noelle. It's really
Hi.
great to see you. Sorry we missed your launch in Seattle with Elise. You know, we were in Canada celebrating our anniversary. Otherwise, we would have been there. You know,
Absolutely.
I absolutely love this book. I love all your books, but oh my gosh, absolutely wonderful. And the question I always ask is, who is your favorite character to write, if you have
Oh,
one?
for lies or for
Oh,
angels?
sorry.
Oh, wow, my favorite. I mean, I really loved writing William. I just there's a reason. So when I was 13, my Nana started giving me her cast off romance books, which some of them are really inappropriate. And but one of them was called Fine Things by Danielle Steele. And it was my first Danielle Steele book ever. And if you know the book, or if you don't, the book, it's written from a man's point of view. And as a 13-year-old, I had never read a book from a man's point of view. And because why would I? That might be weird. And I was intrigued because I had crushes on boys now and they were a mystery and they were not liking me back. So I was so intrigued by this lovely man named Bernie Fine. And forever, I just wanted to write somebody that was kind of like my homage to Bernie Fine. So who was just this decent, kind man who loved his people and he like loved his wife and um, was just a good human being. And so that's who William is. And I just think he's funny and clever and heartbroken and I just love him. I just love him. I just think he's just like the best man. So, and he reminded me of my papa, who also was a World War II vet and who was just the best man I probably ever knew. My son's name, he goes by Jackson, but his name is William, and so is his dad's. And so it was just kind of like these are like the good men in my life all combined into this one guy, and I just loved writing him. I hated that I only do write him like maybe 6 times. Like it's not a lot that we get to be with him, but and I hated that because I could have sat with him forever. But yeah, he was absolutely my favorite to write.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you in Edmonds in March.
Yes, please come. Please come.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susie. And yes, William would make a really good book boyfriend, For people who like that thing, definitely. Sure. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? Oh, Debbie, did you say you had another question that you wanted to go back to? Then we can do. This is the time to do it.
Susie got it.
Oh, Susie. She covered you there. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I can ask one other one. 'Cause I don't know. I don't remember if this was said or not. So excuse me if it was. Were there and I know there were parts that you cut, but were there parts that you had to cut that you like fought tooth and nail to cut that, like, if you could put back in, would it have changed more? Do you think it would have enhanced the book more? Like, I'm just wondering about what got left on the
Cutting room floor.
on the den floor, on the office floor, in the dog's mouth, so to speak.
Actually, for this one, no. And the funny thing was, when I first got my notes back from my editor, she was like, "This is kind of long. Can you cut like 10,000 words?" And I was like, "Sure." So first, I just went through and was like, find all the just like just these little words. Like, what if I just cut a bunch of just out of there? Okay, that didn't do anything. But then she had 3 separate notes where she was like, "Can you expand? I want to see this scene." And I'm like, "How am I supposed to cut 10,000 words when you want me to expand scenes?" And so I ended up cutting 3,000 words and then adding 10 more. So, so I actually didn't lose anything that I love. I got to like expand on things, which was really, really great. And it ended up making it read faster, which is so funny. Like there's more words, but sometimes when you put in those scenes, it just like smooths things out and makes them like go even faster. So that was interesting because she was like, I
That's
didn't
what
even
I was,
know.
yeah, that's why I was wondering, because I felt like when I looked back, I'm like, wow, this was really that long, but it was really didn't feel that long. And it just riveting. I just really, really, really just enjoyed it so much. It's going to be a highly recommended book for
Thank
sure.
you very much. Thank you. Yeah, I was nervous about this one, so I'm just so thrilled that it's getting love. And they put it in Costco. The last two weren't in Costco. Flight Girls was, so I was like, yay! Like I need that little
And
boost.
well, and Costco's getting rid of its books, we hear.
I know, so I was extra thrilled. Like that's yeah, that would be
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
happy.
It's yeah, I liked it because it was a very different twist with the World War II. I just felt it focused on a different without spoiling things, Francine, for you and those who haven't read. Yeah, just very, very well done. Thank you. Applause. Applause, applause, applause.
Thank you, Debbie. I'm still going to read it. I don't care what you say. You could have even spoiled
I'm
it.
not spoiling. I'm not going to do that to you.
Sure.
I
I
know
appreciate
better.
that because
I know better.
I've already got it downloaded on audio, so I can start tomorrow when I'm walking.
Oh, there you go.
Perfect.
But I bet you start tonight. No, I'm just kidding. It's already late.
Well, Debbie, that might be a possibility because it's only 8 o'clock here.
But I'm just going to say, don't count on going to bed anytime soon if you do.
I read that literally I literally read the book like in 2 days. Like I was sitting like at the reference desk and I was like halfway through the book by the time I was done. I was there for like 3 hours.
Wow.
Want to stop, even with the audiobook. You just want to go on and on and on. The banter between William and Kate, I love the way the ping pong ball, the way they spoke. It's like a romance novel almost when they were talking to each other. I loved it.
And then, and wasn't it just so beautiful the way the author did that, like in the audio? So I do audio and either ebook or hardback together.
Yeah.
And it's just a magnificent way to take in a book, I have found. And I have some of my friends on that theme. But it was really, really well done.
I will say this is the first one I've written that when I was done, I mourned it. I didn't want to go because I really that thing with Kate where I felt like I didn't know her. At the end, I felt like I did, and then I was like, well, now I want to know more. Like I just wanted more.
Okay, Kate part 2. We're good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I got my edits back, I was so excited just because I was just like, yay, like I get my friends back. I get to see what make their world more.
Well, this was just delightful. It was just such a great way to end out like our year, Michelle, with your Zooms. And I just really loved it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for getting Noelle. Thank you for joining with Adventures by the Book. I'm a little partial to them. Friends. And this was just so beautiful. And maybe Noelle will get you for a club chat with one of your books.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have them every now and then, Francine.
Yeah.
No, you have them all the time, even at 5 o'clock in the morning.
You can reach out to me on socials or my email and my website, and I love doing events. So
Going to that.
We'll be all over you.
Yeah, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to get in touch with you?
I mean, if you're on Instagram, I'm on there a lot, or email through my website. Check that all the time.
Is your website your first and last name?
Yes, noellesalazar.com.
Okay.
noellesalazar5.com. What is my email? What is my website? I think it's just noellesalazar.com.
I think that's what it is. I was just on it this week.
You have great posts, Noelle. I love following you on Instagram and Facebook.
Thank you. One of my author friends said that, and I was like, oh, there's no thought. A lot of times. I mean, if I make a reel, I take some time to think about like the music or whatever, but I like posting about my kids and my life and the new kitten. And I just like, this is who I am and this is my life and welcome to it. And I hope you're entertained. I don't know.
That's wonderful.
Well, thank you so much. We just enjoyed speaking to you so much. It was just amazing.
Well, thank you. You guys had great questions. This was so great. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm like
Thank you.
fading into the dark. I got my Zoom light out, but I didn't think about there's my Christmas tree. Like,
Yay, and Susie's got hers blinking.
Yeah.
My Disney tree.
yeah, it's cute.
Okay, so
There it is, Francine.
Yeah,
Thank
did
you
you
so
see
much,
it? It's
thank you so much, Noelle and Adventures by the Book, for doing this virtual author visit with the Westbury Library. As I said, we all enjoyed talking with you, and our next virtual author visit, as I said, now we're doing it every other month, and I'm hoping to bring you some great podcast content soon in the meantime. And the one for February is with local author. She's from Long Island, Lauren E. Rico, and she's the author of Familia. Met her last year. She's great. And it's Monday, February 10th at 7 p.m. And you can register on the website. Not yet, but I'll let you know when you can register. So good night to Noelle and all of our attendees. Thank you again for attending. Have a good night.
I'll
Thank
send you the
you.
pic, Michelle.
Thank you so
Post
much.
pictures. I want to see